Well, hello everyone. I wanted to turn around and put together a lecture video that focuses on the concept of IQ scores and what they mean, what is the norm, what is outside of the norm, and what does that really tell us. So let me go ahead and get started. First of all, I'll give you something of a quick refresher just so that we remember here. IQ, okay, stands for intelligence quotient, all right? And though I have the little periods in there between the two, a lot of times people will put the two letters together, IQ, as just almost its own little phrase. This is a numerical score to gauge a person's overall knowledge. And simply put, the way you determine an IQ score is to take a person's mental age, okay? The mental age score results from the testing that you give a child or an adult or a teenager, all right? Based on how they score on the tests, they come up with a mental age. You divide from that how old they actually are, okay? We call it chronological age. So for example, if a child is 10 years old, okay, and they have the mental age of a 10-year-old, you would say 10 divided by 10 is 1. And since you don't want to deal with fractions, you multiply all that out by 100. All right? You don't want to say someone has an IQ of 1 or zero point 0.9 or 1.1. You multiply it by 100, and that gives you a whole number, a bigger number to deal with. So keep that in mind. That is the formula for IQ, mental age divided by chronological age times 100. Now, when we turn around and look at IQ, here is a breakdown of the IQ scores pretty much for all children within, say, the United States. Along the bottom, or the x-axis of this chart you see in front of you, you'll see scores such as 55, 70, 85, 100, all the way up to 145. Okay? And on the y-axis there, that's the one that's going up and down, you see what is called the percentage of population. And simply put, that means how many people have that IQ score. You could probably start at the bottom and say 0, and as you move up the up arrow, maybe 10 million, 20 million, 30 million, and so on. When you look at that chart, okay, the IQ score distribution, the highest point on that distribution is an IQ score of 100. More people have that than anything else, okay? So normal individuals, all right, tend to have an IQ of 100. So as their mental age increases, all right, their physical age increases along with it, stays close to 100. Now from that, you start to see a breakdown, okay? Where basically, if you look, you can see in the chart that 68% of the population has an IQ between, say, 85 to 115, all right? One could say even farther that 34% of the population has an IQ between 85 and 100, or 34% of the population has an IQ between 100 and 115, or in other words, 2/3 fall into this category, 68%, of having an IQ between 85 and 115. What is considered normal? Okay, well, normal is a very subjective term, I know, but really 70 and 130 are very important numbers because in terms of normal individuals, and someone's going to get upset with that term, I don't mean to be, most people have IQs between 70 and 130, all right? That's about 95, 96% of the population has an IQ somewhere between 70 and 130, all right? Those people that have IQs above 130, as you see in the chart, make up approximately 2% of the population. Those people we would refer to as gifted. Okay, so when you speak of someone who is gifted, who has an IQ of 130 and above, only 2% of the entire population has an IQ of 130 and above. And just as a quick aside, you see where it says 145 on the IQ scores? Well, and 0.1%, 145 is basically genius level. And 1/10 of 1% of the population has an IQ of 145 and above. All right. So when it comes to people with IQs of 130 and above, only 2% of the population fall into that category. When we speak of what is called an intellectual disability, okay, the other term used to be mental retardation. The American Medical Association, the AMA, the world of medical doctors still uses the term mental retardation. I've been told that. Psychology and other fields refer to it as an intellectual disability. Um, just making that clear. So I sometimes go back and forth between the two terms because I don't know if you're going into the medical field or if you're going into psychology or just taking this class to take it. People with an IQ at or below 70, all right, are considered intellectually disabled. And roughly 2% of the population, 2.5% of the population fall into that category. So when you're talking about someone with an IQ of 70 or below, we're talking a sliver of the overall population. Okay, everyone else in between that, who is not gifted or is not having an intellectual disability, make up about 95, 96%. So what are these people in the extremes like? Let's start with the gifted. What are people like who are gifted? Okay. One of the questions I've been known to ask people is, what is the cultural view of people with a high IQ? What do we think of? What person on television or real life, what comes to mind? And a lot of times people think of someone like Sheldon. Sheldon from his show, which obviously I'm drawing a blank right at this particular moment, is very, very high IQ. But he and the actors and the actress on there, they seem to sometimes be lacking in common sense. A lot of people would refer to this as a law of averages. And they think that this is very common, that people who have a high IQ probably suffer from a law of averages. They're going to be lacking somewhere else. And these television shows tend to perpetrate this belief that if you're really, really, really smart, then chances are you're going to lack common sense, you're going to lack athletic abilities, you're going to lack somewhere else. It's just a given. A gentleman by the name of Lewis Terman set forth to study this very concept, to see if there's any truth to the idea that having a high IQ means you're going to be lacking somewhere else. Terman, in his studies, did a longitudinal study of over 1,400 subjects, 1,400 people whose IQ was at the gifted level or above. And usually they weren't right on the cut line of 130. They were significantly higher than that, 134, 136, things of that sort. Terman, in his longitudinal study, which means that this study went on for decades, and in fact is still going on now, it started almost 90 years ago, wanted to see if these people with high IQs suffered from a law of averages. Because they're so smart, are they lacking somewhere else? And what his studies basically found was they do not. They do not. There is no such thing as a law of averages. Now, some people turn around and are surprised by this. They point to the fact that they know someone who has a very high IQ but lacks common sense. To that, I simply say this. Think to yourself if you know someone who has a high IQ, in your opinion, and lacks common sense. I bet you can think of somebody. How about this? Can you think of someone who has, in your opinion, a low IQ and lacks common sense? I bet you can think of someone there too. Can you think of someone who has probably an average IQ and seems to lack common sense? I bet you can think of someone in that category as well. We only think of the examples that fit our notion, okay? It's called a representative heuristic. We think of the individuals that fit this law of averages, and we only think of high IQ people, yet we can think of examples in other categories as well. Lewis Terman found that people with high IQs did not automatically suffer from a law of averages. A lot of them were doctors. A lot of them were lawyers. A lot of them went on to other professional fields. One of the better determinants of success, according to Terman in his studies, was one's own motivation. That was a greater determinant than just attitude, okay, in that regard. Motivation was a much better predictor of success than just IQ and things like that. So there is no such thing as a law of averages. It's not automatic. One last thing about Lewis Terman. There were critics of his study who said that basically he did not maintain a professional distance from people. He was too friendly with them. He actually would go out and have dinner with some of his quote unquote friends or subjects. He even traveled with them, his family. They traveled together on vacations and things like that. One journalist reported and referred to this as Terman's termites. They were everywhere. You must maintain a bit of distance and professionalism, which some claim he did not do. And there was always the argument: did that taint his study? Most critics today would say that in the end it did not. And this idea of a law of averages is not real. So when it comes to gifted people, that's not necessarily the case. What about individuals who have an intellectual disability or intellectually disabled? Okay. First of all, know this: there are different types of intellectual disabilities or mental retardation. We speak of what are called organic-based intellectual disabilities. These are cases where people have low IQ, 70 or less, because there is actual organic damage to the brain. Something has been damaged in the brain, and typically this tends to be permanent. Maybe it's due to a genetic disorder, such as Down syndrome, or maybe it's due to the fact that mom drank alcohol during the pregnancy, and now you have a baby that turns around and suffers from fetal alcohol syndrome, of which one of the characteristics is intellectual disability or mental retardation. These would be examples of an organic-based cause for their low IQ. The other type is what is called a cultural familial type of intellectual disability or mental retardation. This means that their low IQ, 70 or below, is due to lifestyle or environment. Maybe they do not know how to read or write. Maybe in their home, wherever they grew up, education was not emphasized. And because of that, their IQ expresses that. At least with cultural familial, we can see a jump in IQ score as much as 30 points sometimes. The problem is with organic-based intellectual disabilities or mental retardation, we don't always see those massive jumps. But they all fall into one category or another. Low IQs, 70 and below, are either organic or cultural. Now remember that when it comes to intellectual disabilities, 2% of the population have an IQ of 70 or below. 2%, keep that in mind. With that being said, note this: 90% of all intellectual disabilities, okay, people with an IQ below 70, 50 to 70, 55 to 70, 90% of them are mild, okay? Of that 2% sliver, 90% of all people with an intellectual disability are able to learn skills up to the 6th grade level. They may be able to hold down a job. They may not be able to go to college, but they can find gainful employment and sometimes end up doing quite well for themselves. So that, needless to say, is a very good thing. All right. There's also what we refer to as moderate levels of intellectual disability. In fact, we don't use this term much anymore. It's sort of the old term. A lot of people today would say individuals with an IQ between 40 to 55. Approximately 6% of all people with an intellectual disability, okay, fall into this category of moderate. Many times, individuals that have an IQ between 40 to 55 can learn skills up to the 2nd grade level. They may be able to work in a workshop, such as the Springfield workshop. They even make a little money. Okay, they like to feel normal. They may require a lot of oversight throughout their lives, but they can feel quite normal, and that is obviously a wonderful thing. So we have mild, and then we have those with an IQ between 40 to 55. That's 96% of all the people right there who suffer from an intellectual disability. The last two categories, the old term was severe. We don't tend to refer to people as being severe in terms of their intellectual disability or mental retardation. Now we say that they have an IQ between 25 to 40. Approximately 3% of the population of people with an intellectual disability, only 3% fall into this category. They typically can learn things, learn limited self-help skills: how to get dressed, how to feed themselves, how to go to the bathroom. That may be about it. All right. So the one that a lot of people think of when they think of individuals with an intellectual disability is what used to be referred to as profound mental retardation. Today, we just say individuals with an IQ below 25. Approximately 1% of the intellectually disabled population, the intellectually disabled community, falls into this category. Many people, when they think of intellectually disabled people or people who are mentally retarded, this is what they think is the norm. And yet in reality, that makes up only 1% of the population. It's not the norm. These people can learn very limited self-help skills, and they can turn around and they're going to require constant care. They may not even have language skills. It's sad, but that is not the norm. Okay, keep in mind, when it comes to people who are gifted, the idea that a law of averages does not hold water. It's not true. And the idea that the typical person with an intellectual disability is severe or profound, that's not true either. All right? Things to keep in mind. Okay, that's all I've got for now. Hope that helps. Take care.